You won't believe how difficult it is to get a six-pack. Only 27% of women and 39% of men actually have a six-pack. That means over 2/3 of us struggle to get these elusive abs. So if this is something you're struggling with right now, know that you're not alone. And I've got some secrets that are going to make all the difference. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. If you don't know me, I'm a coach and a competitive powerlifter. And today I want to share with you 6 things that you need to know about getting a six-pack. Because I promise you, you don't know all of them. They're going to shock you. So we're going to go through these 6 secrets one at a time. Let's dive into it. But before I share these secrets, I want to tell you a story. A while ago, I was training with a guy. He was new to resistance training and he wanted to get in shape. He specifically asked me to help him get a six-pack because his girlfriend had just told him that she really liked guys with a nice set of abs, and so he was very excited to start training. We started with a full body workout where he did things like squats and deadlifts and bench press and overhead press and rows and bicep curls and tricep extensions, all the basic stuff. After we finished his workout, I gave him a plan and he followed it pretty closely for about 4 or 5 weeks. At first, he felt great. He was excited to be lifting weights and doing things he'd never done before. But as the weeks went on, he started feeling down. He was working super hard, but he wasn't seeing the results that he wanted. Specifically, his abs weren't popping and he didn't feel like he was getting any leaner. So after about 5 weeks of feeling discouraged and frustrated, he stopped working out altogether. When I saw him next, he was complaining about how he didn't have a six-pack and he was clearly upset about it. My question to him was simple. Was he doing all the exercises that everyone told him would help him get a six-pack? Things like crunches, sit-ups, leg raises, and Russian twists. He responded by saying, "What? No? Those exercises suck and they're boring and no one wants to see them." And that's when I realized that he had been misled. He had been told that lifting heavy weights would help him build muscle and get stronger. But he was also told that doing tons of crunches would help him get a six-pack. But the truth is, neither of these things are true, or at least they're not the whole truth. And if you stick around to the end, I'll explain exactly what the truth is. So let's start with the first secret. Secret no. 1. Building a six-pack isn't necessarily about doing a bunch of core exercises. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing things like crunches and Russian twists and all those other exercises. But there are much better ways to train your core that will help you get a six-pack faster and more effectively. For example, studies show that exercises like weighted, decline lead to greater than 40% more activation in your rectus abdominis compared to regular The same thing goes for crunches. Studies show that when you add weight to them, you lead to much higher levels of core activation and muscle growth. Now, I wouldn't recommend lying down and doing weighted crunches because that's pretty uncomfortable. Instead, use an exercise ball and do weighted crunches that way. Or my personal favorite, which is called crunchy variations on the decline sit-up machine. Now, here's how you perform this exercise. Start by positioning yourself on the decline sit-up machine. Then grab 2 dumbbells and hold them at your chest. From there, perform a crunch while keeping your abs engaged and squeezing the dumbbells together at the top of each repetition. Make sure that you're keeping your form tight throughout the entire set. Keep your shoulder blades retracted and your eyes looking straight ahead. Take care to avoid arching your lower back and ensure that your crunches are both slow and controlled. Now, since this is such a challenging exercise, I recommend starting with just your body weight. Aim for 3 sets of 15 to 20 repetitions, and as the weeks go by, gradually increase the difficulty by adding more weight. Okay, moving on to secret number 2. To reveal this secret, I'm going to tell you another story. This one involves one of my powerlifting students. She had been training for a few months, and her goal was to compete in a powerlifting meet. As the weeks went by, she started making progress. She was getting stronger, which she loved, but she noticed that she was also gaining some unwanted fat. Remember, when you lift weights, especially heavy weights, your body wants to store more energy to replenish the energy that you expend during training. Since she had been eating the same foods that she always had, she was storing that extra energy as fat. So she ended up looking less toned and less defined. She said, "I work so hard to get strong, but I don't look good at all." And that's when I shared with her the second secret to getting a six-pack, which is that sometimes you need to reduce your overall calorie intake. Doing this is what's called dieting in a caloric deficit, and it's incredibly important for getting a six-pack. To put it simply, you cannot out-crunch a shit diet. I mean, sure, if you do 100 crunches every day for the next year, you might get a six-pack. But if you combine that with a terrible diet, you're never going to get the results that you want. So you can either A, eat fewer calories, or B, work out more to burn more calories. Either way, you're going to need to be in a caloric deficit. Now, there are some instances where you do want to need to be in a caloric deficit to get a six-pack, but they're rare. Like for example, if you're already really lean, like under 12% body fat, then it shouldn't matter too much. But realistically, if you're watching this video, you probably aren't there yet. Now, the third secret is related to this. It's the fact that you will have to cut off a lot of the foods that you love. I know this sounds like a bummer, but if you want a six-pack, it's just the reality. There are no shortcuts. To give you an example, when I'm dieting for a photo shoot, I cut out all foods that are high in sugar, flour, starch, and oil. Things like cookies, pasta, pizza, cake, soda, chips, and bread. All of these foods are delicious, but they're also loaded with calories. And when I'm trying to get really lean, I can't afford to eat them anymore. In fact, the only thing I can eat are things like chicken, beef, fish, fruit, and vegetables. Now, I know that sounds like a boring diet, and it kind of is. But the good news is that if you follow this path long enough, you will eventually reach a point where you can enjoy those foods again. And I say this because I've been there. I've competed in multiple bodybuilding shows, and at one point I was getting so lean that I could uneven eat an egg yolk anymore. Every meal was chicken breast and broccoli, but I followed that diet religiously. And in the end, I achieved my goal and got to enjoy my favorite foods again. The point is, you can't out-crunch a shit diet. If you want a six-pack, you will have to sacrifice. And speaking of sacrifice, secret no. 4 is that you will need to stop drinking alcohol. Just like the last 2 secrets, this one's also a no-brainer. Alcohol is filled with empty calories that offer little nutritional value. In fact, the only reason why alcohol has calories is because it contains ethanol, which your body uses as fuel. And those calories don't come with fiber, vitamins, or minerals. Instead, they can lead to increased fat storage and weight gain. Not to mention, alcohol affects your sleep quality, and sleep is essential for recovery, muscle growth, and fat loss. Alright, we're getting close to the end. We only have 2 more secrets left. And for now. 5. I want to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is sleeping more. You might be thinking to yourself, that doesn't make sense. If I sleep more, how am I going to burn fat? And that's an excellent question. Here's the thing. Most people think that in order to lose weight and get a six-pack, they have to be constantly active, meaning they need to work out a lot and they need to be fidgeting all day. But the truth is, it's quite the opposite. In fact, research shows that people who get more sleep tend to be less overweight and have lower BMI. Also, getting more sleep helps you recover better from your workouts, which leads to more strength and more muscle. And as I've said before, more muscle mass leads to a higher resting metabolism. It also leads to more human growth hormone, which is essential for fat loss. Now, it is very likely that your schedule is too busy for you to get the recommended 8 hours of sleep per night. But I urge you to try anyway. Set reminders, use alarms, whatever you need to do to get more rest. And finally, let's move on to the 6th and final secret, which is also the most important one. And this is the big one. Are you ready? Okay, here it is. You won't get a six-pack until you understand this. You won't get a six-pack until you understand this. Your ABs are made in the kitchen. I know this sounds like a cliche, but it's the absolute truth. People think that in order to get a six-pack, they need to do tons of core exercises like sit-ups and Russian twists. But the truth is that your six-pack is 70 to 80% determined by your diet and 20 to 30% determined by your workouts. And those workouts only include core-specific exercises. So in other words, 90% of your ABs are determined by your diet. Now, I know this might sound disappointing, but the good news is that if you learn to master your diet, you can get a six-pack in record time. Now, I know that you got a lot of information in this video, so I'll leave you with one last message. Comment below and let me know what you thought of this video. What did you find most valuable? What surprised you? And if you want to learn more about how to master your diet, make sure you check out this video. It is one of the most popular videos on our channel. And it is all about teaching you how to calculate your macros. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, I'll see you next time.